Imagine standing in the center of a medieval town square, hands bound, while iron colder than winter presses against your skin. There existed devices so deliberately cruel that they could only have been designed with one purpose: to break the female body piece by piece until nothing remained but obedience. They were forged specifically for women, shaped to fit the curves of the feminine form, for humiliation that stretched across hours, sometimes days, using flesh as both canvas and lesson. According to the teachings that governed daily life, woman was not simply man's companion, she was his burden. She was seen as spiritually fragile, morally unstable, dangerously tied to the physical realm, and worst of all, her very body was believed to be a doorway to sin itself. Eve's transgression in the Garden of Eden cast a shadow that stretched across centuries. Her choice, her hunger for knowledge, was reinterpreted not as curiosity but as betrayal, and from that ancient act, a logic took root. If woman could fall, she must be watched. If she could tempt, she must be restrained. The church preached this truth, the law enforced it, and society, generation after generation, absorbed it without question. Feudal law offered women little protection. Instead, it upheld a system where obedience was expected and deviation punished with shocking brutality. A man might pay a fine for violence, a woman might face the whip, the brand, or worse, her crime: speaking without permission, dressing improperly, refusing a marriage arrangement, or simply being accused of immorality by a jealous neighbor or scorned husband. Female sexuality, any hint of independence, was not just frowned upon, it was a threat to the divine order itself. In this climate, torture devices became more than tools, they became instruments of spiritual and social control. Made to fit the body perfectly, made not to comfort, but to destroy. Among the many horrors wielded against women, few were as visceral or as symbolic as the breast ripper. For sharp iron claws curved inward like the talons of a predator, attached to a handle or mounted on heavy tongs. Sometimes the entire instrument was heated over an open flame until it glowed red, the metal hissing and crackling in the air. Then it was clamped directly onto a woman's breast and torn away. This was no metaphor. Flesh was ripped from bone, nerves, muscle, skin, all shredded in a single, deliberate motion. The pain was beyond description, the damage often fatal. If the woman survived the initial mutilation, she typically died from blood loss or infection in the days that followed. But in many cases, death was not the goal. The aim was terror. The aim was shame, a lesson written in agony for the crowd to witness and remember. Accusations of adultery, heresy, or witchcraft often led to the breast ripper. Women accused by jealous husbands, suspicious neighbors, or corrupt priests were dragged into town squares, stripped to the waist, tied to wooden posts, and made to stand beneath the gaze of a community they once trusted. Then, before all eyes, her body, her motherhood, her femininity, was destroyed. Historical records from 14th century Germany describe the execution of a woman accused of poisoning her husband. As part of her sentence, her breasts were torn off before she was hanged. Enter the pear of anguish. It was small, almost delicate, a hollow metal bulb shaped like a pear, but at the turn of a screw, it opened like a flower. Slowly, silently, its petals spread apart. What began as an object that could fit into the palm of a hand became a mechanism of internal destruction. This was not used on thieves or soldiers. It was reserved for those whose crimes could not be seen. Women accused of abortion, of relationships with other women, of speaking too boldly, or simply of refusing a man's advances. There were different versions, some inserted into the mouth to silence speech, others into the vagina or rectum. Once inserted, the crank was turned slowly, forcing the metal to expand within soft tissue. The tearing began silently. The screams came later. It did not always kill. In fact, it often left the victim alive but broken. A woman might survive only to be rendered infertile, or she might never speak clearly again. The goal was not just pain. It was transformation, to leave her physically altered, marked forever as a warning to others. These devices were not born from madness. They were engineered, sanctioned, and applied by systems that believed their use was necessary, even righteous. They were not tools of random cruelty but instruments of control, aimed with cold precision at women. Each spike, each shackle, each twisted screw was meant to send a message. That the female body was not sacred, not sovereign, not safe. That obedience was survival. That silence was virtue. The breast ripper, the pair of anguish, the iron corset, the scold's bridle. These were not just punishments. They were performances, public rituals designed to strip not only flesh but identity, dignity, and spirit from women deemed unruly. And yet they are rarely remembered, reduced to footnotes in textbooks, disguised as curiosities in museums, or rewritten entirely into myths. But we must ask ourselves, what does it say about a society that invents devices just to break women? And more importantly, if we forget these tools, do we also forget the women they silenced? The answer, I fear, is yes, and that forgetting is perhaps the greatest cruelty of all. What do you think we owe to the women whose suffering has been erased from history? Leave your thoughts in the comments below, because these stories don't end here. They echo forward, into our present, into the way we still speak about women's bodies, women's choices, women's voices. And until we confront that echo, the silence continues.